Game 2, and this time we're going to be taking a look at a game that I played with a 2050 or so Chess rated player. I have black this time. And being an English player myself, I play quite a few English games. There are a number of ways to play against the English. It's a very flexible opening. And there are a few automatic ways to play an English for white. So we're going to go through the first few moves, and I play g6 because I'm a King's Indian player a lot of the time. And if white were to play a move like e4 here, and then follow it up on the subsequent move with d4, we're in a King's Indian after d6. Mm-hmm. And I'm, pig and doo-doo. So, in this case, though, I wanted to limit options for my opponent, and a lot of people would go, well, King's Indian player, play e5. Not necessarily. Being I'm an English player, this is simply a colors reversed, tempo down position, so I'm comfortable, and that's my rationale. Also, it should be noted that if white tries to play for d4 here and transpose into a Maroczy bind accelerated dragon, this move order with knight c6 is taking away that possibility, and already black, I feel like, has dynamic equality or just a touch more because white has limited himself. Mm-hmm. So in the game, after c5, my opponent played d3. After knight c6, g3, d6, staying flexible. I'm not committing a pawn to e5 or e6, e5 being the Botvinnik, and that would be a symmetrical structure, which would limit potential, or e6 being the Fischer line. d6 also has other ideas like queen d7 with b6, bishop b7, and also leaves the idea open for knight h6 instead of knight f6. So this move order for black is very, very flexible. So this is just giving you ideas in the position. Okay. My opponent played bishop g2, and being that we talked about we had a number of ideas in the position, this is the first time where I'm going to ask the question, what move would you play with black?
It's actually a tough one.
Right, because it's a very flexible position.
Mm-hmm. Going off with your comments earlier, I would still go with e6. I guess knight f6 is okay here because they've already moved their d pawn. They're probably not going to play d4, wasting a turn. And maybe I also like b6 because you're going to eye down their fianchettoed bishop.
Okay.
With yours. But if not, then maybe bishop d7. Those are my three.
First one, with b6, this is my fianchetto alarm bell. I immediately look at e5 if b6.
Okay.
And then, more than likely, we play bishop b7, he takes on d6, and that may not be the most favorable pawn structure, but you have to look at those ideas if b6 is played. And a lot of times in English structures, you're looking to play rook b8, a6, b5. So you are limiting counterplay with playing b6. Knight f6 is completely fine, and it's one of the sidelines that I showed if you play a different move order. Okay. That again, a6, rook b8, and now he stopped b5. Well, it's still the plan. So how do we make the plan work? Knight e8, and in this case, b5 wasn't stopped. Sometimes you got to play knight c7 and then hit it home, but b5 actually works here.
Mm-hmm. The b2 pawn.
Tactically, it is just fine, because if c takes b5, knight d4, we're going to be getting our pawn back. And we have a target on b2. And if knight takes b5, knight c7, if knight takes, notice how the bishop on g7 as well as the rook on b8 is hitting b2. And if knight a7, takes, and we have a roughly equal position with room to grow. Mm-hmm. I would say black structure is better than white's because of the weak d3 pawn. Now, That was one way to play, but I played a move that has only been played 33 times in the database. And what happens when you play a move like this, typically when you're playing against someone much lower rated, sometimes I will play a move just to test. And H5 doesn't grossly change the character of the position. I can still play Rook B8, A6, B5 in that plan, but H5 is a test move. So now let's turn it around the other way and say this is already a move that you need to react to with white, H5. What is the best way to react to H5?
First move that popped out was H4. Sorry, F4.
F4, okay.
Just looks like a nice wall closing into the structure. Just like visually looks like the correct attack. Then you can follow with knight F3 and so on. I didn't mean to say H4, and I probably wouldn't play H4 here. It just gives a closer target for black to go after, maybe.
Okay.
But it's not a bad move. And third move, maybe knight G, E2.
Okay. So, in this position, it was none of the above, in my opinion.
Okay.
Because if we're trying to stop the idea, anytime we're trying to stop the idea, you got to think about chess in many ways as like judo. If you play H4, you've stopped the idea, but both sides have given the other player an ability to sink a knight in without it ever really being kicked out on either G4 or G5. In this case, to me, the best move is actually H3, with the idea that if H4 is ever played, G4 gains space and helps with F4 and the attack later.
Okay.
So then black is actually recommended to play F5, and we get a dynamic and interesting position, which is what I was ready to play.
Gotcha.
So coming back to black's perspective after H5, my opponent actually played knight GE2. And this does nothing to prevent me from doing the next move, which is?
H5.
H5, H4.
Excuse me,
Yeah.
H4.
And too little too late, my opponent plays H3. Now I'm simply going to capture, which my rook, which is normally not doing anything on H8, is now an active participant in the game. And also, because of my C8 bishop, it makes it very difficult for white to castle. So we could say that I have accomplished my goal in the opening when I'm playing against a lower rated player. I have created a position where they are going to be required to think and they can't just rely on opening theory. The quicker you can get a lower rated player out of opening theory, the faster you get to I'm playing against you. And if my skill level is much higher than yours, it should show relatively quickly. Unless they're just playing well. But,
Yeah.
you know, you do what you can in chess. So I simply play bishop d7, and this is, I didn't want to commit my g8 knight yet, and I can still go with the standard plan. What's the standard plan I've said a few times?
A6, B5?
Yeah, rook b8, a6, b5, but yeah, the b5 plan is critical in this structure. So rook b8, a6, and now when he goes knight d5, I could go b5, but this is where I wanted to test a little. E6.
Yeah.
Simply say, go away. I don't want you around my pieces. And he goes right back, and then b5. And we're starting to move along in the game now. So he's castled, but I wasn't quick to try to focus on capturing on h3 again or anything like that. I'm going to continue with the natural play, and now white's starting to feel a little bit clustered. You don't normally see a constellation of pieces like this and it be a good thing. And I'm okay with changing the structure at this point. So I play e5. Now I'm locking down d4, making sure that pawn can't be pushed. I'm reactivating the threat on the h3 pawn, and I'm forcing white to make a decision. He defends. I get my last piece into the game. Not on f6, but on e7, because why?
We still want to maybe play f5?
Yeah, we want to leave f5 in the air, and knight f6 probably would be terrible because of bishop g5 with a pin, and we would have to deal with that.
Mm-hmm.
My opponent goes bishop g5.
I was expecting him to play the move prior.
Right. So how do we handle this position? Bishop g5 is a move that is kind of annoying. 3 candidate moves.
All right, stutter step with f6, then f5. I don't really see any way to kick him out. We can get the queen out of the pin with queen
To somewhere.
Queen
3
C8.
options.
Queen c8. Maybe try to keep the knight on f2 pinned down.
Okay.
On the pawn, and I don't have a good third one here. This moment would require me to think.
In a real, really go into the tank.
So
Now, it helped me in the process in the game by thinking about what my opponent was trying to do.
mm-hmm.
What is my opponent trying to do here?
Liquidate.
Yeah, and that's the only thing that he really can do. He doesn't have any natural pawn breaks. He's in a ball on the king side because of the pressure on the h3 pawn. He doesn't really have a break that he wants to make on the queen side. He can't break in the center. So if you could take away his ability to liquidate, then he doesn't have anything he's going to do, and his position's gradually going to get worse.
Okay.
So f6 is the right move, but not with the rationale of f5, because if you play f5, what is he going to do?
Back.
He's going to go right back. We deprived him of a square to give it away? No.
Right.
Take it away. Now, I simply go bishop e6. I say I'm going to improve my position. I can drop the bishop back to f7 if need be to overprotect these pawns, which optically look kind of loose, but there's nothing he can do to get to him right now. But this is just staying flexible for the future and giving my opponent the opportunity to go wrong further. Mm-hmm. And that he does, b3, but his position's very difficult. No discredit to my opponent whatsoever. Queen d7, simply continuing pressure on h3. Mm-hmm. But I don't want h3. It's not enough yet. The knight on f2 and the bishop on g2 are adequate in defense. So this is another good position for solitaire chess. What would you do with black?
King f7 seems pretty natural as a waiting move. Maybe we can shift plans here and play our rook to a8, because he's not doing anything, just staring at a pawn right now. And an interesting idea. Maybe knight d8, f7, g5 would be interesting.
Okay.
It's still a closed structure, so it seems like you have time to do stuff like that.
All right, and this is the type of position which is why we're working on solitaire chess.
Okay.
And let me give you some hints, and I'll let you try again.
Okay.
Because you weren't on track.
Okay.
Now, if you played rook a8, he could just go like rook c2 or something. Even if you get king f7, double rooks on the a file, you can't ever really break through over there.
Okay.
If you play, even if I gave you, say, g5, as soon as you play g4, he's just going to play h4 and completely lock it down. So pushing the g-pawn at some point isn't going to break it open. Keep in mind that white's in a ball. He doesn't have any plan, and he's just kind of shuffling his pieces because he's having to play defense. That means we have a lot of time to improve our pieces. Now, you did notice that the rook on b8 may be misplaced, but at the same time, if the a pawn ever moves, our b pawn ever moves, our rook will be in a good spot.
Okay.
What other pieces do you think could be optimized further? The bishop on g7, that's not really happening.
Right.
The bishop on e6, that's not really happening. The queen and bishop are doing a good job. The rooks...
So the knights. But which knight is the question?
Okay.
I mean, if we want to continue squeezing, if we can sink into c3 at some point, maybe knight a7, b... Oh, okay, cool. I was on the right plan. All right.
So notice again, white's paralyzed. So why give him something to think about or give him something to do? I'm just simply going to put my knight on b5, where it's touching all of these great squares for later, just to see what he'll do about it.
Okay.
He may react even worse.
So we're not going to immediately hop in there. We're just going to sit.
No. Yeah.
Okay.
There's no reason to rush it. So he goes rook c2, knight b5, and now g4. And here you could start thinking about plans like g5, but consequences for playing g5. If you go g5, he can go knight g3, and then he can start dropping into squares. But we'll go knight g6 and f4. Double-edged decisions when your opponent's been in a ball gives them something to do. So I would rather squeeze a bit. So continuing the squeezing process, 3 candidate moves.
We can prove our other knight, I guess.
Uh-huh.
Where's he want to go, though? I guess knight to c6, knight c8, a7. Knight c8, b6.
Where's he going from there, though?
Nowhere.
Right.
So I don't know.
We can rule those out.
Okay.
And knight c6, you're right, because if we're dropping into d4, say the c knight drops into d4 and he captures with either piece, we take with the c pawn, and then we're dropping into c3 next with the knight, and it cannot be captured because it's just a bone-in-the-throat piece forever and ever and ever then.
So it's a type of position, you know your opponent can't do anything, so you ask yourself, what's your worst piece, and just make him stronger.
Right.
Okay.
And honestly, this is just my natural cadence because I believe this was a 1-minute game.
Okay.
So this is just the way that I perceive the position even when I don't have time to think.
Okay.
I'm looking at my opponent's pieces. He doesn't have anything to do, so I'm going to squeeze him as hard as possible. He goes knight g3. He was hoping for g5 or something. It's just not going to happen. And then I drop into d4, albeit with a different knight. But in either case, if he captures, I'm probably going to go back to capturing with the knight since he removed the knight from e2. Rook a8. Pressure on the a-pawn now because
all your pieces are optimized.
And the rook has moved away. He's going to have a hard time with defending the a-pawn. So knight e2 coming back. Now this is one more great moment before we kind of blaze through the rest of the game.
Well, white still wants to try to liquidate, so my first thought was maybe knight b5. Just don't trade.
He's still cramped, yep.
If we allow it, our structure, we would be taking with the e-pawn. Taking with the c-pawn just feels wrong.
Okay.
At the end of a bunch of exchange. Oh, wait, no. You could do knight takes, pawn takes. Instead, bishop. Then, does the bishop get anything on f4? But this is first instinct moves. Okay, so knight b5, king f7, and rook a3.
Okay.
Those are my 3.
And again, cramped. I'm not allowing trades.
Okay.
He can't do anything still. He just repeated moves. Knight e2, knight g3, knight e2.
Okay.
So I'm like, okay, yeah, repeat again then. And that's what he does. But then I'm going to go king e7.
Okay.
Different than king f7. The reason I don't want to step on king f7 either is because he could potentially play g5, or there's discoveries on my king at some point. King's much safer on e7, so we're going to let him sit there instead.
Okay.
Rook c2 to try to go after that. And now let's optimize all the pieces. Rook a6. Knight b to d4 because, again, no knight on e2. Queen a7. Not the rook yet. Rook is still doing a job keeping h4 at bay.
Okay.
Queen wasn't doing anything. Let's get the lady involved. Now rook a1. 3 candidate moves for black.
Well, I see a small tactic with knight takes on b3.
Or bishop takes.
Okay, bishop as well. I didn't see that one. Glasses.
Uh-huh.
And rook a8.
Yep.
Okay.
Most forcing.
Okay.
And from here, it's a matter of technique. More things are dropping, and when up material, trade down, but trade down in the most effective way. A lot of people would have just grabbed the knight. The queen is the only thing that could hurt you in the open position. We'll take his queen, and we take all of his hopes and dreams. Now, I'm forcing more trades. That bishop's been bad the whole game, so let's go ahead and get rid of him. Oh, you're going to check me. Let's go ahead and get rid of that. And it becomes a very clean affair. When you have no weaknesses, you know what to do.
Mm-hmm.
I got the passer. Nothing much can be done. And rook takes
Exactly.
f3 with the pawn's a goner. It's a girl. And with that, we end game 2 of Solitaire Chess.
Solid.